Okay, welcome to the Play Skillfully podcast. This is probably a very exciting episode for all of you as you see the topic, how to raise a kid with an adventurous spirit. So a couple weeks ago, I was in Fort Worth and I was speaking at a conference. And when you see that some of your dear friends are also speaking, you try to sneak in to their session, which I don't do very well sneaking in. If you know me, I come with like piles of stuff and noises. So I didn't sneak in very well, but I was there. And so this couple shared some amazing thoughts about raising kids with an adventurous spirit. And I have talked to so many moms over the years who are what I would label helicopter moms. They're fearful of everything. And so when I heard this topic, I thought we have got to talk to them on the podcast because I know so many people would want to hear what they have to say. So I'm going to introduce them. It's a little difficult because one, I've not called properly over the years of knowing him. Dr. Roger Smith and his lovely wife, Jan, met them years ago in Texas, actually back to Texas, and quickly became some of my favorite people. They are pioneers in homeschooling, you guys. Like they were doing it when it wasn't cool. They were doing it when it was illegal in some places or definitely looked down on, if nothing else. They've started all kinds of communities, support groups, leadership. They've done it all. They're not 150, even though with all they've done, they could be. So I probably am only going to call him Roger. I can't call him Dr. Smith, but he is legit a doctor. So this man knows what he's talking about. So the Smith couple, Roger and Jan, so glad y'all are here. So excited to talk about this topic.
Thank you. We're excited to be here, Kathy. It's always a pleasure to interact with you, and we look forward to seeing you whenever saw you on the roster in Fort Worth. We were excited to capture some moments with you.
And if anyone in your audience has never heard you speak in person, they need to make an effort to do so because I cried through the first session that I heard you speak at, and mine had already graduated. But you have a way of pulling at heartstrings as you speak truth and wisdom.
You're so sweet. It was so good to be back speaking because, to be honest, after taking a break, I had thought to myself, do I have anything to share to this age group still? Like, I'm kind of older now. I'm a grandma. Do I have something that these young moms need to hear and dads? And by the time I finished, I was like, yes, get me back out there. This is what I'm meant to do. So it is fun doing what you're meant to do. And I see that in you guys too. I mean, y'all are making a difference. I watched as people were listening to you and nodding, and you could see they were taking it to heart what you were saying. So why don't you get started telling us a little bit about your own kids and the adventurous spirit that they have and had?
Well, we've been married for 43 years, soon to be 44. And amongst those years, we've had 4 children that are all now in their 30s and beginning the 40s. And they're now having children of their own. There are 7 grandchildren in the mix. And surprisingly, we've lost all of our children to Texas. We live in Louisiana, and our children all have, for various reasons, work and relationships and different things, have now live in Texas. So we have to work to go see our grandchildren. They're 6 and 7 hours away from us. So
wow!
But they've done a lot of adventurous things in their lives, and we were going to give you a list of some of those, and then we're going to talk about how to pursue that.
I love it. All right, let's hear it.
Okay. They have started businesses. They've gotten elected to lead student organizations. They've done fundraising among businessmen.
Given speeches in front of large crowds and acted in plays.
They've biked across France and lived in foreign countries.
Jumped off 40-foot cliffs and met lots of interesting people.
They've learned lots of new skills, talked to people on subways.
Tried new food and dreamed about having fun.
They've gotten married, have had children,
fostered children, and invited neighbors over for dinner.
So some of those things sound kind of way out there, but most of life is an adventure. And so having a neighbor over is adventurous. So
it is, yeah. What got you started thinking about, hey, this would be a good topic to share?
Well, we see as a habit, mamas have a tendency to play it safe, to say, be careful, be careful. We hear these words all the time. In fact, Jan has this little mentoring relationship with moms in the community where they come over to swim at our pool, and they call it Mom and Me Swim. And one of the things that we hear all the time is, be careful. And Jan says, stop saying that. You got to say, be brave. You are brave. You are so big.
I love
and
that.
It starts with little things like that. Just the words that we're saying, we either fosters an adventurous spirit or it squelches it.
Yeah, I think so much. Like I always tell parents, the words we use become your child's inner thoughts. So what you say to them when they're little is what they say to themselves as they're facing these things later in life. So if you raise kids and you're like, be brave, go for it, you've got this, how fun is this? This is exciting. Then they're going to have those thoughts as they are looking at this strange thing before them that might be scary. But instead of saying, this is scary, I shouldn't, they're going to like, I'm brave, I can do this. I mean, it makes all the difference how you talk to them when they're little.
Exactly. And, you know, kids, you have to be with them. You have to be present with them as they start doing things. Well, now, first of all, especially boys, they're going to do things that make no sense to you as a mama, and they're going to do them innately, you know, like climbing over the back of the couch and jumping, or any number of things that they do. I'll never forget the first time that our oldest son, Caleb, we were in a gym and he just took off running and jumped over a chair that was sitting there in the gym.
Right.
That would have never occurred to me. And my first thought is, why would you do something? That's crazy. Stop that, you know? And I had to realize he cleared that chair no problem. Even though it's not something I would have done, he did it. You know, the incessant, when they hit that junior high age and they're always jumping up and hitting the door frame, you know exactly what I'm saying.
Yes.
It's like,
you know, I do.
But they have to do those things to push themselves to a different level. And I think that we need to be careful to let children push themselves beyond maybe what we're comfortable with or what we think is necessary, because children have a way of knowing what they can do, an internal gauge that helps them to say, I'm going to go for it. I'm going to try it.
Yes.
And if we feel a little uncomfortable, I think the best thing to say is, give it a try. I think you can. And be okay if they get hurt a little bit.
I know. I even struggle a little bit with that because we live on Lake Martin, as you know now, and there's a big cliff that the kids all go. It's called Chimney Rock, and they all go jump on it. And sure enough, just 2 weeks ago, I had friends here, their young son. He's like, can we go jump? Can we go jump? And like inside, I am dying, you guys, but I did not show it. I just said, of course we can. We'll go right now. You've got this. You're brave. He jumped over. He climbed up the rope. He jumped in. I thought I was going to have a heart attack watching. He was amazing. It was amazing. He was so proud when he got back on that boat. I mean, he was 10 feet tall. It was beautiful to watch.
So how did you manage the fear that kind of came up in you? You know, that's one of the things we have to do. We have to manage our own fears. What happened?
Yeah, you really do. I just had to kind of do some of that self-talk to myself. He's going to be okay. We showed him how to jump out far. He has a life jacket on. So we took safety measures. And then I just kind of was internally giving myself some of those same self-talk, words. It's okay. It will be okay.
And that starts, when they're very, very young, that they jump off of something. And we think it's not necessary to jump, but it's not necessary to do a lot of things in life, that those children need to do those small steps in order to achieve the bigger step. He didn't just jump off of that and he never jumped off of anything. That child has been pushing himself since he was younger, or he wouldn't have had the capacity to consider doing that. Yeah. So I think that, especially with moms, if we don't manage our own fears, then we're going to pass that on, guaranteed, to the kids.
Absolutely.
I'm afraid of heights. And yet I've had to come to terms with the fact that I do a lot of things that other people would not do. I ride horses, I do water sports and other things that some people are not comfortable with. So I've had to, like you say, talk with myself, like zip lines or anything that has heights.
Yeah.
My children love to climb, and they've done a lot of things that are much higher than I myself am comfortable with. But you have to ask, is this like Chimney Rock? People do that all the time.
Yeah.
And it's not like there were just 5 people killed last year.
Right.
Nobody was killed, or they wouldn't still be doing it.
Oh,
But there's risk. There's a
yeah,
risk getting in your
That's
car.
right. That's
We
right.
take
absolutely.
risk all the time. And,
Yeah.
one of my things was, is this a reasonable risk?
Right.
That I would
Yeah.
ask myself, and then to train my children to gauge, is this a reasonable risk or an unnecessary risk?
Right.
When I think back to the small children, I also do want to say some of it is necessary. Like our boys, especially if we're going to kind of put them in, little pockets here, most of them are heavy sensory seekers. And so much of that jumping, swinging, big movement, heavy movement is necessary for not only gross motor development, but brain development. So that's
Right.
another way to convince yourself,
It's
okay, maybe this is
connected.
scary, but I know this is benefiting him in so many ways.
Right.
And if you don't do it, the other thing I've seen, parents who kind of avoid those things, those children tend to struggle even academically if they don't get those big movements and that sensory input that they need as a young child. So it does have some great academic,
Yeah.
emotional, social, physical benefits as well.
Yeah. And some of the adventures start out with things that feel safe, like learning to ride the bicycle on your driveway or on the sidewalk in front of your house. But eventually, they're going to need to cross a street, go through an intersection. So the things that seem reasonable risk then become the stakes become a little higher, and you do
Right.
have to be present during those times, and prepare them for those decision making, model it, and all those different things. But that's part of taking something that begins as a basic skill and advancing it, so we can see it in riding a bicycle the same way with talking with a friend, people. You talk to someone that's familiar before you wind up being able to talk freely to someone you don't know or that might be a little bit different than you. And
Well, and
so
I think that's
all of these skills are like that.
And I think that's so beneficial. I love that you bring that up about even talking to someone, how that's adventurous. Like sometimes we might not think, is that really adventurous? But I'm thinking your kids, you said traveled to, was it France and
Yes.
stayed in strangers' homes?
Yes, yes,
Right.
yes.
So
In
had
fact,
they,
I can tell you that story a little bit so it paints the picture for people. Now, granted, they were young adults during these years, so it wasn't like we took a 13-year-old and sent them alone in France. Okay, so but it did build up to that through all
correct.
the things preceding that they had become familiar with having conversation and trying out a language they were not totally comfortable with. So they were actually, Emily had gone to live in northern Italy and to learn about something she was interested in. But during a time where
Her
there,
journal making. You have a
My
journal
favorite.
that she does.
so
Love
anyway,
it.
she was what she was doing had kind of come to a kind of a stagnant point, and she her brother had taken her over there, and she said, "Listen, let's do something fun. Let's get bicycles and go to France." And
Why
which
not?
was just the neighboring country. For us, it sounds like going to a totally different part of the world, but for them, it was 150 miles away on a bicycle.
Right.
So they planned kind of where they wanted to go, but they would just go from town to town through the countryside, and they learned how to get invited to people's houses, and so they were on the road
That's a
for
great
90 days,
story.
90 days together, and for out of those 90 days, they only had to camp. They took all their camping stuff with them. They only had to camp for 13 days. The other however many days that is, they were able to finagle people to invite them into their homes just out of conversation. And so they had
Again,
they
And thus, so many adventures from sailboats to, they had a couple of things in their favor. They were good conversationalists,
hmm,
they were hardworking, and they were healthy.
yeah
They were healthy and strong, and
yeah.
they looked stable and strong. They didn't look sketchy. You know what I'm saying? And so they would separate when they
That's
would
good.
go into this little shop. There was always a gathering place in a small town in this
Yeah.
area, and they would go to that place and they would sit at separate tables because they learned if they sat together, no one would approach them. They would assume that they were a couple. and
Right.
they would
Yeah.
be left alone. But if they sat alone, somebody would come by and ask them, So anyway, it led to many wonderful opportunities for them. And they
Mhm.
also had to get along. But they had
Yeah.
been friends as homeschoolers all
Yeah.
their lives. And anyway, they had a wonderful time. But Kathy, it started when they were little.
Right.
These things don't just happen. They start with a balance bike, and then a big wheel, a tricycle, a training
Mhm.
wheels, and
Mm-hmm.
then in all of these stages, the parent is involved and then releases that child when they get stronger. Imagine you running along beside the kid learning to ride a bicycle, and you're kind of there to
Done it.
guide and
Yeah.
hold. You've
Yeah.
only done that 10
Yeah.
times, huh?
Yeah. A lot.
So
No, when you have a
anyway,
lot of
no,
kids, the siblings
eventually,
end up teaching them. You only have to teach
well,
the first couple, then the siblings teach the rest. So
That's true.
that's
That's
you
true.
true.
did
That's a
get off
good
that. Yeah.
point.
Yeah. 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 Well,
But
listen, I've heard you
that
mention.
concept of releasing them into a bigger and bigger adventure. We used to ride
Yes.
bikes in town all around with like make way for ducklings, Roger and me, and the four little ducklings behind us
I
with their
love
little
that.
helmets. And so, they did more and more things, and they all rode their bikes in college. And so, riding their bikes, they were very competent bike riders before they ever considered buying a bike while they were in Italy and biking across southern France.
That's amazing how it built up to that. But I want to go back because you guys both have mentioned it now. And so I want to just kind of touch on it for a minute. You've talked about the importance of being present. You
Yeah.
both have said it takes being present in those early years. Kind of
Yeah.
unpack that a minute for me.
Well, if you can imagine going to a playground, and if you simply just watch what happens, the child gets to the top of the slide, and what does the child do? The child looks to see if the parent is watching.
Every time.
Mama, mama, watch me. Daddy, daddy, watch me. And that is a signal to us that we must be present, and we must at that moment become the cheerleader. Not the one going, be careful, but to cheer, oh, you did it. You're so big. And it is that picture that happens over and over that gives confidence to the child to embrace a new experience. However big it is to you, or however small it is to you, to them, it's big. So if it's
Yeah.
the first time they've done something, being present, one, gives them confidence, but two, we can prepare them for success at that, because sometimes it is dangerous, and we need to say, this is the way to do that. And
Yeah.
and we can coach them and guide them to success. And that leads to and fosters that adventurous spirit.
Well, I'm
And
going
it
to be
also
the tough. Sorry, Jan. Go ahead.
it mitigates some of the danger when you're
Yes. Right.
there, like
Yeah.
a hand over hand crossover, like a monkey bars. I
Yes.
remember with each of mine when they started that, I would just stand under the monkey bars and
Mm-hmm.
say, "I'm here. I'll catch you if you fall."
Well,
And
you're leading into the point that I just wanted to make that as you're saying this, I'm going to kind of be the bad cop a little bit. I go to a lot of playgrounds with my grandbabies, and more than not, I see parents not even looking
Uh,
up. They
on
are
their
on their
my
phone.
they're
goodness.
on their phones. While their kids, it's
Yeah.
kind of like the perimeter of the parents are all sitting on
Yeah.
their phones. The kids are all in the middle playing. So, in order to be present, in order to say you're
Yeah.
brave, you've got this, you go
Yep.
be the cheerleader, you literally have to put your phones down, guys. When you go to a park
Exactly.
or somewhere where there's one danger, like the monkey bars, but
Yeah.
also just the opportunity of watching your child get to that top of the slide for safety, but also to start putting in that
Yeah.
that spirit of success, that you've got this, that confidence builder. You got to be paying attention. You
Right. You
have to
do.
be physically present and emotionally present. You
Yeah.
got to show
That's
up for
right.
them when they're little.
Yeah. And even being present doesn't always mean that you are there holding their hand, making sure
Right.
they don't fall, but that you are aware and engaged in the process. You may be sitting on the bench watching, but
Right.
again, not totally mentally submerged in your own world whether it looks like a phone, a tablet, or a magazine, or whatever. Anything can be our distraction, but are we
Sure.
engaged? I'm with you 100% that our children need us in order to be brave.
And that it's an ongoing process of releasing them as they gain competence. Like,
I like
take the
that.
monkey bars. You might hold their legs without really supporting them, but you
Right.
physically hold their legs. The next time you just stand there, and eventually you don't have to be there at all. They say,
Right.
I got this, Mom. You go ahead,
That's right.
And that's how it is with any new skill.
Yeah.
The engagement, I think about the pool, and one of the things that mom and me swim is I tell these moms, if I can get my fat self in that pool, you can put your skinny little bottom in here too. That you need to be with your children. You cannot play the color game, or you can't play any number of active games with them in the water if you're not in the water.
Right.
And so I just feel like that the security that they get with you being physically present, you can just keep encouraging them to do the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And sure, it'll get to where they're later elementary and you don't even need to be out there. They're such competent swimmers. But all of those initial things.
I also think if something goes wrong, it's important that you're there. So if they do get hurt, if
That's
they do,
true.
How you handle those moments too, because you could you're the deciding factor, right? If you freak out, told you so, told you shouldn't have tried it. How dare you? I mean, this is why we don't do this.
Here's what we would say to that.
Yeah.
When they get hurt, they need comfort, not correction.
Yes, 100%.
Comfort, not correction. And so our tendency is to go, I told you so, or whatever. So. But that is the dream killer. That is putting, dumping water on the passions of their adventurous spirit. So sometimes they just need our comfort and go, oh, I'm so sorry you got hurt. Oh, but I think you're going to be okay. Yeah. Yes. Are you willing to try that again?
Yeah.
Maybe after a rest? I don't know, but it's not, jumping on the situation and going, you shouldn't have done that.
Right.
Can you imagine any child that's learned to ride a bike that didn't get a scraped knee somewhere along the way, some sort of injury? It's a reasonable risk to learn to do that.
Risk. Yeah.
Jumping, any new skill that you're learning, even using a knife, it is so much safer for them to be trained alongside you to use a knife and chopping, something soft to start with, and eventually chopping carrots and potatoes. But to understand how to use a knife, they're much less likely to get hurt than they are if they just take a knife and try to do it themselves with no training.
Yes,
but there's still danger.
There's still danger. I have my Jackson. He is my adventure boy, right? He wanted to get a pocket knife for his for Christmas when he was 7. So we're like, absolutely, we'll see what we can do about that. He gets the pocket knife. We say, listen, let us open it together the first time. We can do this together. Well, the next thing I know, Jackson comes out of the bathroom, blood dripping everywhere. He had taken his little pocket knife into the bathroom and tried to open it himself, sliced his finger open. You know what? He learned a great lesson. No one died. It was ugly for a minute, but he did it again. We did it together, and he went on, and the boy uses a pocket knife successfully at 22 now. So, yeah, it's funny.
I think when they do something, like say he waited and you trained him and he did something with that knife, I think it's very important for us to say, I'm proud of you. Those kids need to hear that. I am so proud of you.
Yeah.
And it makes them more willing to risk again. Even if they risked and failed,
absolutely,
we can be proud of them for trying instead of saying, I told you that was too dangerous. You should have never tried that. No, we want them to become businessmen, entrepreneurs, to do all of those things. And these small actions when they're little, getting on an escalator.
Yes.
That still can be scary to me, especially with lots of luggage.
Yes.
But those kinds of things as a child is a big adventure.
I have to
going
laugh.
up a glass elevator.
Yes. Well, after hearing you talk, I was coming back to Atlanta. Now, if you've ever come into Atlanta, we have big escalators going to our baggage claim. And it
Yeah.
was it was almost as if you had written the script. So I see the mom, she's already gone, the escalator is at the top. The dad is way behind at the very beginning. Well, the son just hops on. He's probably like 4. He hops on and then all of a sudden realizes what's happened. Terror is all over his face because his parents are so far from him. I'm on the escalator next to him. So the whole time I'm like, you're so brave. I'm so proud of you. I thought, oh my gosh, you can tell I just sat in this workshop. So the little boy just looked at me and his face lit up and he just was looking at his mom and he's like, you could see it. I've got this. I've got this. And he did great. But I put into practice what you taught me right then. So I was pretty proud. It was funny. It was definitely, it was the perfect opportunity after hearing your talk.
So one thing in learning these skills, we oftentimes get a little afraid because we say they're not quite able yet.
Right.
But that's when the child wants to do it, when they are not fully competent. They want to empty the dishwasher whenever they cannot really do it right.
That's right.
They want to fold the clothes when they are going to make a mess of it. But if we wait until they're fully competent and fully capable, they're not interested. They've moved on to something else. And so we have to be willing to start when they are not competent and not going to do a good job, but we can be there with them to say, yes, this is the better way to do it, or whatever. Yeah. And so that's a mistake we see so often, is waiting until they are fully competent but uninterested.
Yeah, that's a great point. What would you say to the helicopter parent? Like, this mama's listening and she's like, there's no way. I am not letting my kid jump off the bed, let alone chimney rock. What would you say to them?
Well, when in Roger's book, Roger has a parenting book called Parenting with Influence. And so in the principle in that is that one of the points of the goal of parenting is eliminating that child's need of you. And you are not going to always be there. You do not want to be there when they're 25 or 30 unless you're on vacation together. Yep. You want them to be independent in their life. And one symptom of that as a society is the number of 16-year-olds that will not get their driver's license. Whereas in our generation, you couldn't wait to get your driver's license.
15 in Mississippi, girl.
That's right. 15. It was 15 back then. That's right. That's right. And we got it the day we turned 15 and drove on,
Drove. Yep.
But in our opinion, that starts the whole, in any of these things, whether it's climbing, jumping, swimming, any of those things.
Interfacing with people.
Wheels. Right. It starts when they're little bitty. And you incrementally build that skill. Maybe they learn to drive their little Type's car, their little plastic car that they're moving around, or a little motorized car, or, eventually you're going to get a go-kart or a four-wheeler or a side-by-side, or those kinds of things. You don't just jump in a car and start driving.
So
that's what we're asking kids to do now. We give them zero experience, and suddenly we're wanting them to drive a vehicle in the city.
In Atlanta, yeah.
So to the helicopter parent, I would challenge them to ask their child, what is it that you would like to do that I haven't let you? And just start with a conversation.
Yeah.
And just say and go, okay, well, let me. And then
thinking of all the answers.
Get mentally prepared for whatever it is. That if they want to say, I want to pet a dog. Okay. Well, let's find a safe dog that you're comfortable with, and you make it where you can let go. Yeah. And then start with something where you kind of have set it up to where you're okay with that. Yeah. And then little by little, you can realize that you don't have to be in charge of every aspect of your child's life so that they survive. I mean, most children survive life. Okay. There are some that don't, but those are the exception. You've lived through one, and it had nothing to do with your own parenting. Had to do with Okay, so yes, we can be unwise, but we also can be overly cautious, and so
we can.
For the helicopter parent, sometimes you start with the child, what's most important to the child at the stage they're in right now, and go, okay, I'm going to get myself together and we're going to do this thing. Maybe with some other parent and child
That's what
that's
I was
doing
going
it.
to say. I've got two of my
Yeah.
kids wanted to jump out of airplanes. And I'm like, I don't want to know about it. I don't want to watch it. I don't want to see a video. But I will set that up for you. So they did. They went with someone else. They both jumped out of airplanes. They had a blast. I never saw anything except the very end when they touched the ground. I saw a video of that because I couldn't handle it thinking of my babies jumping out of an airplane. But they did it. We still got there, and I supported them and encouraged them, and I'm
Yeah.
so glad they did that. Just glad I
Yes.
didn't have to go. So,
I think that reading books about, when they're little, about adventures and
yes,
things that have happened to people and how they've overcome. There are so many wonderful stories. It's exciting when you don't know what's going to happen, and
yes,
so it's seeing ways and experiences that people have had that they have overcome adversity.
Yeah.
We want resilient kids that don't give up, that haven't been pampered
absolutely.
or mamby-pamby, but that they can face adversity and keep going.
Yeah,
And
And
they can have the mindset of looking for the solution. We all face troubles in
absolutely.
life, and if you just say, okay, there's a way to manage this, whatever this is, it might be
Yeah,
a financial thing. It could be a relationship thing, whatever, getting lost, losing your phone. We have to think of, how do I solve this? And that's an adventurous mindset.
when
So
they've
have you
done
talked?
something hard before, it's easier for you to then remind them, remember when you did so and so? And Emily, our daughter, she has a leather design business now, and she has this commission piece that's a long coat for this beautiful, wealthy woman, and she wanted it trimmed in eel. And so Emily's made the samples, and it was time last night for her to cut into that eel skin and the
Yeah,
leather. And she called me and she said, "Now tell me, can I do this, Mom? Should I do this?"
And she's
I love
38.
that.
She's
Yeah,
And
38. So,
and I
so
said, "Emily, would you like for me to send you a picture of some of those horse show clothes you made when you were 16?" And she
wow.
said, "Oh, Mom, you are so right. I can do this." And because we
I
were
love
so
that.
scared, and she said, "I can do this. You're right.
That's
I can do
incredible.
this."
I was just going to ask you, have any of your kids said, now that they're adults, have they recognized that you encourage that adventurous spirit in them? Yes. What are some things they've
well,
said?
yeah, as they tell their tale. Now, actually, more often than not, they think that they were bold already.
But
and,
okay, that's awesome though, right?
and they don't recognize when we've kind of fostered it, to be honest. But now sometimes when they're afraid, they will say, "Do you think I can do this?" And we go, "Sure," and then they go do it. So
Yeah.
uh, but so they do sometimes. Like Emily called yesterday to ask about that. And our classic example is whenever our son was building a skate park. He had a business whenever he was 15 of building skate park ramps. And he got to a point where he said, he had his first real skate park. He says, "I can't do this." And so I broke it down for him. I said, "Well, what about this ramp right here? Can you build that one?" He said, "Oh yeah, no problem. I can do that without even thinking about it." He said, "What about this one?" And when we went through all of them, I said, "Well, then you just make them all and put them together."
Yeah.
He
You
says,
made a
"Oh
skate
yeah,
park.
I can do that. That's not a problem." So sometimes it is just
Yeah.
walking them through them managing their own fears.
Yeah.
And so just like we have to manage ours, then we can train them. As we have practiced managing ours, then we can help them as they express their fears to work through them. And sometimes the fears are saying, "You shouldn't do this,"
Mm,
and helping them to decide when the fear is legitimate and when it's not. So
yeah. I
that's
think
a
that's good.
relationship thing and a conversation thing.
Absolutely.
So there's
I
no
think that's so
absolute
important with the
rules here.
relationship.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think if you have that relationship, then they trust you. And again, that happens when they're little. You can't wait till they're 15 and like, okay, now I'm going to develop a relationship and they're going to trust me. But you've got to, if they trust you when they're young, you build that. When you say you've got this, they're going to believe you and be more willing to take that risk, I feel like.
And
So
if
I
they've
think
been
that's so
given
important.
real responsibility that
Hmm.
involved risk, that,
Yes.
we think of adventure as just fun. But
Right.
our youngest, we were having a conversation with him recently about a talk that we give, that we talk about him being great.
Mm.
And what does greatness look like? And he said, when I was 17 and you had me load up the $10,000 Kubota zero turn mower and drive an hour to the city that's nearby us to mow 5 different locations, that we had rental properties at the time, and it was a bad month and we had a lot of open properties that we had to take care of. He mowed those 5 yards, loaded that mower back up, and drove home. And he said, that was the day when I got home that I said, I must be a man. I did a man's work today.
I love it. Man, that's
So
just
sometimes
success.
it's work. It's their work, but it's an adventure to them because they're overcoming a challenge.
Absolutely.
So
Real responsibility that you give them more and more and more. That wasn't the first time he had mowed a yard, wasn't the first time he had hooked up a trailer, the first time he had driven to Monroe, none of that. That he had done all
but
of those things with us multiple times. So then we
but he was
felt
doing it alone, and
the
that
first
was
time you do it, then
yeah.
you feel a sense of real accomplishment,
Mm.
real adventure.
Yeah.
So, just kind of recapping again, I hear you talking about being present when they're little. I hear about you saying that it's baby steps, that you're not jumping off chimney rock at first. You're taking it from the time they're little. It's like little jumps, little moves forward. It's encouraging them. We're the cheerleaders. We're the facilitators. We're the ones that are right there to hold them up under the monkey bar, but also the one that's willing to move out of the way and let them try
Amen.
it themselves. Anything you wish you would have done differently in that regarding the adventurous spirit, not like the whole world life, but just regarding their adventurous spirit? Is there anything you thought, gosh, we kind of missed the boat on that one?
In retrospect, now at 60 instead of 30, we realize that some of that really did have danger. That zip line that we built in what were we thinking?
Yeah, that's
That
awesome.
we were young, we had fun, we wanted them to have fun. And to me, the older you get, the more aware you are of real
Yeah,
danger.
so
And
true.
so now we have older parents. They're not 20, they're 40
Right,
or
right,
35.
right.
And so I think it makes us a little bit more cautious. So maybe we should have been more cautious. But you know what? There was this one day that a cousin was visiting, several cousins were visiting at the main place, our home. And we had this huge swing from a big tree that was big fun, but probably dangerous too, because they would go very high.
Right.
They had done this high zip line that we had. She had ridden horses and four-wheelers, done all these dangerous things. She came in to get dressed to go to her softball game, and going up the stairs, she tripped and broke her finger.
So of all the
Good
dangerous
example.
stuff, she didn't get
Yeah,
hurt, but just going upstairs. So injuries happen,
they do.
and usually it doesn't happen with all the big stuff. It's the little
That's
things
right.
where we get hurt,
Yes.
and so.
And it's
But
amazing how few injuries we
as
had.
far as regrets,
Yeah.
you know, the thing I probably would regret is not taking more pictures of the things that they did.
I
That
love
we,
that.
you
Yeah.
know,
Your
just
crazy adventures. You
we
sound
did
a little bit like Phineas and Ferb,
we
like
didn't
that TV
record it.
show.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know that. You're going to have to introduce us to that.
It's a
Phineas
very,
and
I mean, it's an old show on Disney that my kids used to watch, but the whole thing is about adventure. These little kids dream up adventure every single day and do outlandish stuff because it starts with their
Mhm.
dream and then they make it happen. So I love it. It's very much what we're talking about, but I don't even know if it exists anymore. Okay, before we go, I need to push your book and tell people where they can hear you speak. I know you have a podcast. Let's do a little bit of that.
Okay.
So tell us all the things.
So a lot of the things about us and things that we do, you can find on our website at rogersmithmd.com, and it has MD for medical doctor, rogersmithmd.com. And so the book can be purchased there. We have some other things that are conversation tools that help for conversation at the table, whether it's with your family or with guests. And I have a quote book that's coming. It's not on the website yet, but you can be looking for that. We love using quotes because it's people's wisdom that they've gained through the years, and we just tap into their wisdom. So I love using other famous quotes. And so we will be coming up soon speaking. See, in 2 weeks we'll be in Fort Worth.
Houston.
You'll
be in Houston.
Houston.
Because I'll be there too.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. We were in Fort Worth. We'll be in Houston in 2 weeks at the THSC conference, thsc.org. And then
we'll be in Colorado mid-June on the 18th.
So if you live in Colorado, the Czech conference, CHEC.
The Rocky Mountain.
Yeah.
Rocky Mountain Homeschool Conference, CHEC. CHEC.org. So you can find those dates there. So
we do marriage conferences, we do marriage retreats, and
I bet you're great at that.
For churches. So we love teaching that. So we do churches or professional events as well.
Yeah.
So and the best way to reach you is just through your website.
Yes. And so you can contact us. There's a contact form on there.
Awesome.
If someone is interested in having us come to their area and do any kind of presentation, a weekend or a one-day event or things like that. So we'd be glad to do that. So one thing I would love to challenge the parents. I don't know how much time we got left. I wanted to say one thing.
Yep.
To expose your children to people who have lived boldly. Okay. If you know somebody that had done something in your community, have them over, let your children meet them and hear their story.
Yes.
Okay. So, but if you don't know someone, you can do the same thing through reading a book about them or an audio book in the car or something like that. But if you want your children to be assertive toward life, have them know about people who have done it. And whether it's you or someone you know or someone in a book. So expose them to people who have lived boldly.
And I think it's good for them to get comfortable, the children asking questions to adults about how they live that bold life. I know that I remember when John Michael was little, he saw a guy in the store with his World War II hat, and John Michael loved World War II. So he asked me, could he go speak to this guy in the grocery store? And the guy happened to be in a wheelchair and missing one of his legs. And John Michael was pretty young, probably 6. And sure enough, John Michael went up to this man, excuse me, I see your hat, and talked to him as a 6-year-old. It was the most delightful, moving conversation for both parties. The man got so much joy and thanked me for allowing John Michael to talk to him. And then John Michael, it only just deepened his love for that history and wanting to know more because he met the real life person who had been a participant in that event. So, I mean, I agree with that wholeheartedly.
And see, the child would ask questions that we would be embarrassed to ask.
Correct.
Like he would look at the man's leg and go, "Where's your leg?"
And he did. And he did do that. And I mean,
and the guy's glad to talk about it.
100%. It was beautiful. But I think, again, that's another area our fears kind of hold us back. So I love that we can get them involved and introduce them to people who live boldly. Well, you two live boldly, and I admire you so much. And I'm so thankful you took a few minutes to chat with me.
Thanks
for being here.
Us.
Yeah, my pleasure.